I'm standing on the exact spot where Edward Baldock was when the Lesbian Vampire Killers murdered him and drank his blood from the wounds in October 1989. Here is the patch of grass where his body was found, with 27 stab wounds in it, and naked, with streaks of blood spattered over that tilt-a-door. It is one of the best preserved historical crime scenes I've ever been to. Almost nothing has changed. This building on our right is painted a different colour from what it was on that horrific night in 1989. But the enthusiast for historical true crime scenes can get some real historical intimacy here. Many news stories, many lowbrow documentaries like the one I'm making now run the photo you're seeing, but rarely with the context included. Here's the context, and it is utterly extraordinary. For he has tricked the murderer into coming back to the exact spot where only a few hours ago she murdered a man to drink his blood. Wearing the same clothes she will be mugshotted in later, she doesn't know he has got her number good. She is, in fact, a free woman at this stage. She has, in fact, sneaked back to the scene once during the night, and she probably needs brown trousers now more than he does, for her perfect crime is unravelling fast. There's a definite sadness to this place. But now to ruin the mood with lots of context, background and stuff. And please note, I will be unashamedly calling them Lesbian Vampire Killers. A lot of ignorant people wet their pants over that vampire thing. That's because they don't know their stuff. Like this woman who was in prison with one of them and says they were not vampires. Well, you were able to see for yourself that they had no Renfield syndrome signs at all, were you? Yes, I know vampires and other spooky shit don't actually exist, but they do actually, because it's a real psychological condition. Medical vampirism, clinical vampirism, now it's been renamed Renfield syndrome. And just look at that. That is one of the behaviour patterns these chicks actually practice and admitted to. Yes, that means there wasn't any need for all the poo-pooing from a great sniffy height of all the vampire thing, let alone the asphyxiating, predictable feminist drivel pumped out by gender studies inmates like Verhoeven. No, it did happen, and it's a real psychiatric term, and it was fully backed up by the other three sideshow freaks.
Because we're craving for blood. She said that it's like, have you ever seen a shark?
Just before we plunge into the backstory of these girls, let's quickly humanise their victim, Edward Baldock, age 47. We'll come back to him, but it's time to introduce him. I pray that my efforts will not be thought distasteful. Tracey Averill Wigginton grew up in a new money family in Rockhampton, a pleasant enough Queensland coastal town, and also in Cairns, the much more interesting backpacker trap, besieged by jungle-clad hills, and also in Brisbane, so-called big country town that was rapidly morphing into a world city. Early in life, her real parents handed her over to her financially grand grandparents in Rockhampton, who doted on her and turned her into their little porcelain doll. Later in life, when Tracey's bad choices had gotten her into more trouble than Burke and Wills, she would dredge out the abuse excuse by painting this couple as some sort of heroes from a Marquis de Sade novel, dedicated to constant sexual abuse of Tracey and constant beatings vicious beatings with electrical cords. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny, however, for all Tracey was doing was cynically recasting her half-sister's lived experiences as her own. But as adolescent rebellion set in, the porcelain doll evolved into a regulation-issued diesel dyke. As she marked time waiting to inherit the trust fund from those supposedly hateful grandparents, she didn't make these claims until they were too dead to dispute them or to defend themselves. And she didn't have any compunction against accepting many, many thousands of dollars in easy money bequest from them, which, being gay, she totally blew on high living in 5 minutes anyway. As she reinvented herself as a tattooed-up bikie, she did things like work as a guard for a brothel and generally get a reputation as a hulking great brute. That is one of the most enduring furphies about the Lesbian Vampire Killers, and even people who meet her and interview her fall for this shit. Look! Ron Hicks says she was as tall as they were. Voila! He's wrong. See? It should never have gotten started, for her mugshot, same day, says this. That's about 3 inches shy of 6 feet. It takes me back to when Grace Jones was touring Australia, hyped as 6'4", and made the mistake of going on the Don Lane show. He actually was 6'4", and from then on, they billed her as 5'8". And Tracey's Sunday school years gave way to a plunge into everything occult. Ouija boards, esoteric literature, pentagrams and Ankh jewellery, sacrifices atop Mount Archer near Rockhampton, overt occult tattoos, hanging out in graveyards at night, during which these two lovebirds stole a headstone to keep in their apartment, and clinical vampirism. Soon she was the charismatic leader of a cult of lesbians, whose occult knowledge otherwise only comprised what they had seen in dodgy slasher flicks. This served to heighten the prestige that the well-read Tracey enjoyed in their estimation. Kim and Tracey Waugh lived in this neighbourhood, Clayfield, one of the poshest in Brisbane. Oh, la-dee-fucking-da, girlies. Weren't you supposed to be unemployed or something like that? Who was paying for all this? Fun fact, the first president of Russia, Alexander Kerensky, moved here to live. Now, I don't honestly know which part of Clayfield they lived in, where their address was, so I started filming in a street dominated by apartment blocks, since that's what they had, an apartment, admittedly one of the most vampiric-themed ones in Clayfield. Meanwhile, Tracey Wigginton had made a new home in Enoggera, a rather delicate choice for someone with a long-running history of impersonating a soldier from her North Queensland days. Efforts to find Big Tracey's house were crowned with success. Here's how the media showed Tracey's flat, where police went to spoil her afterglow, and next quarter century too. But you sure as hell won't find this. And I'll tell you exactly why. Because they flipped the film, which should look like this. They flipped the film to hide the fact the media were not standing in Glenelva Terrace, where you may. They were standing somewhat illegally in the bus interchange, where the buses actually have to drive, of Enoggera train station on the other side. See for yourself how the frontage of 111 does not protrude past the frontage of 109 in the way that the media made it do. No, if anything, recessed. But try flipping them around, and you do duplicate that effect the media got in 1989. Voila! So going back to its real frontage in Glenelva, Therefore, no matter what changes have been made to the building, its identity is clinched. You're looking at it, folks. The lair of the Lesbian Vampire Killer. She sallied forth from this humdrum abode to strike a blow against decent society that fateful night in 1989. While brimming over with resentment over her girlfriend having affairs in the next room all the time, because that's what lesbians do, if you're wondering what they do. But we're getting ahead of our storyline. Let's get back to the four girls forming a cult in their two separate apartments. Now let's look at that rumpus room cult that washed up into Tracey's life and planned a vampire murder together. Lisa Ptashinsky, classic professional patient with over 80 admissions to hospitals lately for half-assed suicide attempts. She had known Tracey for just 2 weeks when she agreed to commit murder for her. Wow, Tracey sure did like to hobnob with the intelligentsia. And padding out the foursome, the established couple of Tracey Waugh and Kim Jervis, a much better-looking pair than the rough trade we were just looking at before. Although she endeavoured to look more sensible and feminine than the others, she was capable of domestic violence, in which, by the way, lesbians lead the pack out of all the orientations. Just saying. I'll call her Tracey W. to avoid confusion with Tracey Wigginton. I should have stayed in bed. So, we come to the fourth of the bunch, Kim Jervis. Certainly easier on the eyes than Lisa and Big Tracey, but I suspect this impression is a superficial one, since she looks haggard and transfixed in a rabbit in the headlights facial rictus in the pictorial record, the exception being when caked in swampy makeup. I will be calling these chicks swampies, not goth, because, mate, you're not a goth until you've sacked Rome. Her hobbies were vampire kitsch, graveyard fetishism, tongue vaulting, and watching JFK's head get blown apart in slow-mo over and over. Life was potentially looking up for Tracey. She had just gotten a job in a small sheet metal working factory in Coorparoo, but she only saw it as an rim job. The other three girls resolutely maintained that Tracey Wigginton was feeding on blood, sometimes pig's blood obtained from a butcher, sometimes human sucked out of a cut in Lisa's arm. A better fitting anal orgy might be to view them as a band, which had a domineering vampire section and a second fiddle enabler section. Skeptics make much of Big Tracey's non-admission of the blood drinking. Big shit. There's no reason why the word of this stinking liar should outweigh the other three.
I don't remember exactly, but Kimmy and I were sort of racing all around this area.
She only ever told the truth after learning that the other girls were all ratting on her, whereas Lisa went to the police voluntarily after first confessing everything to the respectable host couple she lived off in Ipswich. They then took her to the police station where she fessed up, tellingly incriminating herself too. There genuinely are people who drink blood for a kink, for it is a real fetish, which does have its own corners of the internet. And make no mistake, there really are people like this guy on the Springer show a few years back.
One night she had the bright idea she was going to drink my blood and I was going to drink hers.
But I will stay non-judgmental about this fuckstick. In real life, there are just not enough essential nutrients in blood for you to live on it. When Lisa said that, she had only known Tracey for about 2 weeks, and she did have a habit of speaking in general terms, say those decent hosts that I mentioned she lived with. If you do wish to live on blood, just be ready not only for dreadful diarrhea, but also for rapid onset of malnutrition. Logically, Tracey must have lived on actual food or that champagne she drank just before committing the murder would have left her face down on the floor and more full than a feminist complaints box. The girls also claimed that Tracey did a trick in front of them where she convincingly disappeared, leaving only her cat-like eyes glowing. Yet this superpower pulled its own disappearing act when she needed it to get out of police custody, court, and jail. But Tracey announced she wanted to progress from the thrill of sucking it out of Lisa's arm to the thrill of hunting and killing for blood as a predator. And being mostly unemployed, they swiftly translated thought into deed. Tracey would later say her most pressing motivation for the ghastly deed was built-up resentment over her partner, Donna, scissoring the nights away in the next room with the cavalcade of side chicks, and would have killed if she'd stayed in the house that night. She would act out on a random man. Yeah, you know what shit like that reminds me of? It reminds me of the gobsmackingly skewed logic of Tiara at the Brisbane Slut Walk of 2011, Pavlov's dog style shaming the entrenched culture for this?
I was raped in the sluttiest way possible. At a ladies' night by a woman at a swingers club. And yes, this is what I was wearing. When I reported it to the club organizer the next day, she said, well, you look like you were having fun. I wouldn't be surprised if my rapist was here and doesn't even know I'm talking about her.
Well, lady, you sure struck a blow against the evil male penetrocracy with that case. Grimly turned out in black leather, Tracey headed to the car and headed to Ipswich to pick up Lisa for the big night. Join me now for a deep muff dive into everything they did that horrible night. Here was the haunt of the Lesbian Vampire Killers.
Sorry, that's bad.
Club Lumors was its name, though since it reopened after many years being boarded up, it's been called Sue Castle. So, the girls came to Club Lumors, which some books wrongly call Glamours. Maybe it's because they thought it was named that, and the music is, of course, way too loud to have a conversation, but they figure, in their tiny minds, nightclub people figure, I suppose, that anyone who comes to their club doesn't actually have anything worth talking about in the first place, and whereas they're generally correct, these girls actually did talk about something very interesting indeed in here that night. The timing cannot have been just a coincidence. Tracey was too well read not to know that it was only minutes away from the old Julian calendar's reckoning of Halloween, October the 21st. But we won't go in because nightclubs are for people who like getting their eardrums destroyed, their wallets emptied out, jostled by fuckwits, and charged up the date for a whole lot of ice. If you're looking for it, it's at 648 Ann Street, and it has been renamed Sukasa, just in case it's any better than it used to be. The girls were conspicuously in a celebratory mood. Well, sort of champagne. They were drinking Asti Spumante, in fact, Riccadonna. Unlike Italy, in Australia, spumantes are so prestigious they are often thought worthy of reposing alongside passion pop itself on the shelf. Just some people doing what they're not supposed to be doing. Probably some lesbian vampire killers. Staff at Lumors noticed that the girls were having such an unusual choice of drink by their standards, and that they were kitted out in a black theme, unusually also. while they toasted what they were going to do soon. Somehow I just can't reconcile this with their later craven claim that they just wanted to work him up and then leave him there and go away. No, you don't make a big event out of that, stupid tarts. So, even at this stage, they were leaving a trail 5 miles wide. Having finished cooking up their plan, they then headed to where their car was parked. So, the little ladies just crossed the road, oh god, look at that, crossed the road over to here, and it was a simple matter of going to their car. Into this little side street where there was an Asian grocery. So how are you? And they went to their car somewhere in this street. Which is now full of Italian restaurants and pizzerias. Then they fired up the Tripmobile and drove it, presumably just around this very tight curve, like that white van's doing, up onto the Story Bridge. Let's do that. Getting ready to head across the Story Bridge to their rendezvous with destiny. And they went up the ramp onto Brisbane's shockingly awesome and Eiffel Tower-esque 1930s Story Bridge. Oops, I forgot it was night time. I'd better just darken up a bit. The quest for blood brought them to this street, O'Connell Street, in this neighbourhood, Kangaroo Point, in the shadow of the Story Bridge on the south side. Very yellow film, I'm sorry. It's going to look like that new Rachel Pugler movie, that Off-White and the Nine-Figure Loss. I'll give it my best shot. Poor Edward Baldock, 47-year-old council worker, had been drinking rather heavily at the Caledonian Club. Let's take this as an object lesson to show you why you shouldn't just believe everything that comes up when you ask a question of Google. You see my search question at the top, and look what they came up with. They've got the stupid sluts drinking at the Caledonian Club where the victim was drinking. And now, when I try to find the address of the long-defunct Caledonian Club, Google tosses me a faraway club on the wrong side of the river, opposite the Maya sauna, which was still good in those days. And then there's our friend Donald Grant, who writes the quite extraordinary information that Edward had been drinking at the Irish Club in Brisbane's CBD, and had walked across the river. Get your fucking facts right, mate. And it's beneath my dignity to sink to the trick that this YouTube documentary sank to, running a hotel in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, as the Caledonian Club. No.
At the Caledonian Club in Kangaroo Point.
It also didn't look like this complete fantasy in another YouTube documentary. Enough. I give you the Brisbane Caledonian Club. I am determined to be the only documentary about the Lesbian Vampire Killers that's actually accurate. 47-year-old Edward Baldock had just finished winning a darts tournament at the Caledonian Club and had spent rather more of the proceeds on alcohol than he should have. Look, I would love nothing more than to humanise this unfortunate fellow, but there's hardly any photos of him. I've had to make do with just 2 photos. They say he called a taxi, but he started wandering down this road, O'Connell Street, barely able to stand up. He would have been conspicuously all over the place. Police said he had a .38 blood alcohol reading, 7 times the legal limit for driving. And making one more adventurous, more trusting, and more incautious than one normally is. Nowadays, if it happened again, you would expect his family to sue the club for irresponsible service of alcohol. I don't know where it was in this street that he was clinging to a telegraph pole, just barely able to keep up even then. This curve here will do, and next thing you know, a metallic green Commodore pulled up on the other side of the road, and 2 women approached from it. One of them was Kim Jarvis, because she was a lot sexier than the resolutely irritable pair of Tracy and Lisa. They offered him a lift to his West End home and sex. You never know, it might even be with all 4 of us. And in an unexpected bonus to their plan, they would not be needing to slip bags over the heads of Tracy Wigginton and Lisa. He probably would have found them pretty all right anyway. It's important in such situations to ask yourself, does this pass the too good to be true test? And yes, he did get into the car with them. They offered him a lift. He lived in West End. How convenient, because Tracy knew just the place in West End that would be isolated enough for a murder. "He's dead," Tracy whispered to Kimmy. He soon fell asleep. Most books attribute you to this to drink, but I think it's because they were playing Prince music. They were playing Prince's Bat Dance, which is a god-awful mess that makes Beethoven's Wellington's Victory Symphony feel well-structured and disciplined by comparison. It is all over the place. It is like wading through molasses. And you should listen to it, and then you can feel some of the disappointment that we in the optimistic 1980s felt when we learned that this long-awaited and massively hyped Batman movie had been sabotaged not only by putting Michael Keaton in as the star role, but by giving the musical score gig to fucking Prince. Trust me, it contains some truly riveting dance choreography, but you can't see that on a fucking audio tape. It is a man-made wasteland strewn with unexploded wank bombs. Fap damp.
Keep busting.
Fap, pap, slap, crap. Disgusting. Hot mess. Hot mess. Without the visuals, its sole redeeming feature is the fact that it ends. Fun fact, although Prince's cause of death after his 2016 death was long withheld and speculated on, it can now be revealed it was losing his celebrity deathmatch against Prince Charles.
The winner, the Prince, formerly known as Charles.
Now, I'll try to reconstruct the route they drove him by, but not arriving at the conclusions a YouTube documentary with this map did, where they explore the back passage and then park at the extreme end of the elongated Orley Park. And Tracy walks the garlanded sacrificial bull, who can barely stand up, remember, all this way. And not least of all, because, slight spoiler alert, that means Tracy later has to run, vast-ass though she is, 3 blocks through residential neighborhood on Friday night, completely tits out. No. No, that guy can count me as his first heretic. I agree with him up to this point here where they start into Vulture Street. But I dare say they would just take the common sense option of rocketing down Vulture Street to the end, and then down Montague Road, and then skirting around most of Orley Park to the actual chosen murder site, like this. Having arrived at the chosen murder site. So, my route again. They drove him down Main Street and then down Vulture Street, and to connect the two, ironically, they would have had to pass this splendidly Transylvanian-looking building, another irony there, the Wollongabba Police Station. Yes, we will be coming back to that in our narrative. Nobody ever notices it, and by the way, it has the great Gabba Stadium right behind it. Lisa was driving now. Try to picture the vibe in that car as the girls who were seeing the human side of the victim they desired to murder were confronted by the sheer squalor of this. It is safe to say that by the time they arrived at the murder site, 2 of them had lost the stomach for this sacrifice. Lisa brought the car to a stop at the chosen sacrificial site, Orley Park, West End, close to the South Brisbane Sailing Club building. Tracey led Edward out of the car and down to the chosen murder site. Initially, Tracey led him down, not to where she eventually killed him, but to the concrete boat ramp. The murder site is on our right now, but we're not going there yet. At first, Tracey Wigginton lured him over this way, with the promise of sex, to the very edge of the river, the boat ramp. They sat down here. You hear the gentle lapping of the waves. You see the reflections of apartments. Tracey claimed later that she and the other girls had agreed they would ask the man whether he was a family man. She asked him and he said no. We have only her word to go on for that. And that he said, "Are you a hooker?" And that she tactfully worked past that question. If it's all true, then it makes a mockery of their claim that all they ever wanted to do was work him up to think he was onto something good and then scoot, leaving him there, doesn't it? But it cannot have been very comfortable. It's corrugated concrete. Not too comfortable to sit on that, to lie on that, to do jiggy jig on that. Romantic as the location may be, the reflections of the apartments across the river. Romantic as this setting can be, they thought better of it and decided to relocate up to the boat shed outside the second roller door from the far right. to here. This is where Tracey got her top off, giving him a mouth-watering foretaste of what was to come. Then he started undressing too, and she excused herself to go away for a piss. Quite the erotic failure she must have been. Edward stacked his clothes neatly. But it was just a cover story. She was in fact hurrying back up to the car to ask the girls for help in overpowering him. She was thinking it might be too difficult, even drunk. Did you think it was to do with scruples? No. Tracey urged them to come and join in, but only Lisa volunteered to do it. Little Tracey and Kim stayed put, frozen. Lisa and Tracey went down opposite sides of the house with knives in hand, and whereas Tracey approached the man who expected her, Lisa approached him by stealth from the rear, ready to plunge the knife into him. He was still seated. Now with the girls together within arm's reach of him, he turned around and caught Lisa straight in the eye. "What are you doing?" She froze up and couldn't plunge the knife in. But Tracey sure could, and the rest is history. Tracey plunged her knife into the back of his neck with such tremendous force that it was driven in up to the hilt in his spinal column. Lisa remained frozen to the spot, transfixed by the unearthly spectacle, as Tracey plunged the knife in over and over again into the back of his neck. The doomed man cried out to Lisa for help, a cruelly forlorn hope. Then Tracey demanded Lisa hand over Kim's butterfly knife. The butchery was audible across the river. On the north side, there was an ear witness who described what he heard as a very impassioned set of groans. Lisa handed it over, and Tracey continued with her frenzied stabbing, 27 thrusts in total. Then she told Lisa to go away, and if she should attempt to interfere in the feeding, she would get her arm ripped clean off. Lisa withdrew, but hid at the side of the building watching what happened, and I think it would have been here where you do get a good vantage point. Next, Tracey nonchalantly sucked off a fag, impassively watching the last life force ebb out of the poor fellow. In her savagery, she had opened up a deep gash in the back of his neck, which police described as wide as a bread and butter plate. Tracey now wallowed in the most feral thing imaginable, pursing her lips into that neck gash and sucking the blood out and consuming it. To get an idea of the sheer squalor of this act, keep in mind that the victim had lost bowel control, and being next to that pong did not put Tracey off feeding. Somehow there was still enough blood for Tracey to indulge in some kind of incredibly creepy finger painting with it. In all fairness, Lisa was no Rhodes Scholar, but get your head around this. She was now a conspirator to murder, an attempted murderer, a carriage driver for premeditated murder, and all this just to butter up a stupid slut she didn't know existed just last dole day, who had all the criminal generalship skills of Beavis and Butthead. Nowadays, you can take your pick of books or films that claim no one ever saw the blood drinking, and Tracey denied it, so it's just some shit that these other girls cobbled together to lessen their own responsibility. But we are indebted to Ron Hicks for interviewing the Ipswich couple Lisa was living with, Wendy and Wayne Sugden. They told of how this walking train wreck not only told them a few hours after the murder that she had watched the blood drinking from the side of the house, but had been telling them for some time about Tracey's vampire tendencies. Back at the car, the other girls must have had their hearts in their mouths, when this spectacle could not have made them feel any more comfortable. Tracey urged them to come and see her handiwork. Kim had always been the one of the foursome who was most interested in vampires, yet here she had piked out of the team effort, so Tracey made sure she got her nose rubbed in this. Tracey had bought her that knife this week as a ritual athame just for this exploit. The prevailing stench must have really brought reality home to her. And all the considerable charisma of Kimmy and of Big Tracey had failed to shift little Tracey out of that car, where she was probably catching her breath in snatches. Tracey now went down to the river to wash the blood off herself and the knives. And after about half an hour of slaking her thirst for blood in this her own private sacrificial bull ring, Tracey then went to the water's edge to wash the blood off herself and the knives. She had gotten a towel out of the car to wipe down with. And oh shit, it's very slippery. I'm not a lesbian vampire myself. Tracey later said that with every thrust of the knife, she fantasized she was killing one of the people who had let her down in life. The other girls said she looked ashen-faced, like she had had a 3-course meal. Probably no other was feeling triumphalist at this time. It was time to strap on their seatbelts and get going home. Little Tracey would later say that she was the reserve victim in case they didn't find someone. Whew. It's called hanging out with the wrong crowd. Or, in Japan, it's what they call kokura luck. But I find it very hard to believe in view of her being a long way short of fanatical. So what sort of future did our cult envisage for itself? Did they seek to become latter-day thugs like once plagued pre-colonial India? Big Tracey was very well read in boring esoteric literature, so she might have read that these cult killers sacrificed random strangers to the goddess Kali. How long would the lesbian vampire killers go on being a cancer on decent society? All in police custody later that day. Initial stop for the Batwings mobile was Clayfield, to the den of Kim and little Tracey. But any celebrations were quickly postponed. Tracey couldn't find her telemachine card, and it could very well be at the murder site, which would trumpet her name to the police in block capitals. And so her reliable, useful idiot Lisa had some more driving to do back to that accursed place. Oh, did I say reliable? Look, it's not entirely clear what this chick was good at, but it wasn't having a cool head in a crisis. They got stopped by a police random breast testing team, and she went to pieces even though she blew low. But, in fairness, Lisa had been sucked by a lesbian vampire 4 times in the last fortnight, Maybe there wasn't a whole lot of blood in her body. Maybe they didn't stick strictly to the 470 milliliter limit that a formal blood donation involves. Now Tracey cut her losses and unloaded this excess baggage at her home in Toongarra Road, Leichhardt, then hurtled back to her own Inogra den. And, pissed off though she was with her partner Donna, she tersely demanded Donna drive her back to Orley Park. She may have seen a dead body there, you see. But another door slammed in her face. There were cops from arsehole to breakfast, as Aussies say. So she simply went home, took some sleeping pills, and awaited whatever may come. Across town, an early morning rower had discovered the hellish scene, and it was now well and truly under police investigation. And just 9 hours after her savage crime, they were knocking on her crypt. At last, closure on her agonised speculation over whether they had found her teller machine card. And two things that would normally happen didn't happen. One was that Tracey didn't bubble over with joy upon learning, "We found your missing card," and the other was that the raid was not greeted by someone with 4 balls, speaking from the shadows, "We have been expecting you, Mr. Bond." Meanwhile, another detective went through Tracey's car and, you're not going to believe it, but here goes, the stupid bitch hadn't thrown away the blood-stained towel yet, despite believing she was on the suspects list. Do you see what I meant about her criminal generalship skills being completely rubbish? The cops didn't tell Tracey they had found that bloodstained towel. They didn't tell her where her keycard had been found. Got to keep her guessing about that. It's decision time for this suspect. But she was a model of cooperation, and they took her here to the Woolloongabba police station, now defunct and completely ignored. And no one will let you tour it either, damn it. Her alibi followed the KISS principle. She and Kimmy and little Tracey had been playing on the swings in the park, play fighting. The card must have fallen out then. She was careful to keep it as simple as that when they conducted her around the murder site.
I can't remember exactly, but Kimmy and I were sort of racing all around this area here.
He's wearing the look of policeman everywhere, isn't he? Police were playing for time to mask the fact that one of them had secretly gone back to the Inogra flat to interview her lover. Donna and her side chick Tracey made massively damaging admissions about Big Tracey, that she had been sharpening knives that week on the veranda, and that she had known there was a dead body in the park when she omitted to say it to the police earlier. And that she had told Donna to shut up and not tell the police about that. Big Tracey was now the prime suspect, with the Invisible Man running second place, and every other place below that. Still, they hadn't told her everything they knew, and when they took her to the crime scene, she had to fudge, guessing what they knew.
I can't remember exactly, but Kimmy and I were sort of racing all around this area here.
No doubt she thought that was sufficiently catch-all, but now it's time to tell you where the card was found. Remember when we saw the doomed man getting undressed? Well, the card was found deep in his left shoe under his pile of clothing. While his own one was in his wallet hidden under the boat shed door. Laugh that off, fat lady. And the cops revealed to her that they knew she knew about the dead body when she'd been talking to them earlier. Meanwhile, Kimmy was being a busy little beaver behind the scenes. She knew Tracey was answering police questioning and not revealing much. So she took it upon herself to phone up everyone's favourite Sapphic Colin Carpenter over there in Ipswich and tell her to shut up. But, consumed by remorse, she confessed to the people she lived with, and they took her to the Ipswich police station, where she totally shopped Tracey and herself.
I knew she was going to kill him, but I couldn't stop her.
And now the lovebirds turned out to be songbirds.
I'm craving for blood.
And at some point, Kimmy and little Tracey deserted the sinking ship too. Tracey was laid low in the end by the wagging tongues of lesbians. Tracey had not mentioned Lisa at any stage because she was trying to hide from Donna the fact that she was having an affair too. Abruptly, the police revealed to her that Lisa Ptashinsky had confessed to everything on behalf of all four of them, and Tracey buckled.
Where did you stab him first?
Back of the neck here.
How hard?
Hard enough to drive the knife up to the hilt. I then withdrew the knife and I stabbed him in the side of the neck. I stabbed him on the other side of the neck and I continuously stabbed him. He was making a gargling sound. I knew the blood was coming out of his mouth.
It was time for the girls to get used to a change of scenery, namely Brisbane's infamous Bogger Road prison remand section. Well, not here, the women's section was separate and down that way. And here's a treat: actual final week of October Brisbane conditions. It's pretty hard to imagine any prisoners wanting to excite Tracey Wigginton to anger after what she had done. Her defence started plotting an insanity plea. That guard post over there is quite ornate. I like it, in an oriental sort of way. Meanwhile, her trio of disciples were plotting how to blame everything on her weaving a spell over them. They had abundant material to work with, but I'm kind of guessing that their cellmates were not in the habit of pouring out their hearts to these girls. All manner of psychiatrists and psychologists rushed in to regress her under hypnosis and so on, and try to get to the bottom of her multiple personality disorder, something only about half of psychologists actually believe in, by the way, and I believe she played up to it. She was very well read. She would know how to manipulate this, and they came up with 5 or 6 alternative personalities, always vying for control of that gorgeous body, and they called them alters. An entire gaggle of these water walkers came forward to analyse her and find reasons why she should not have to do a lifetime in prison for an absolutely appalling murder. I could tell you how they came up with Little Tracey and Big Tracey and a supremely unpleasant personality called Avril and Bobby. No, look, the short version of it is that even Tracey herself got sick of this shit, sacked her defence and insisted on pleading guilty when they were trying to make her unfit to plead. Even the mental health court had washed their hands of this after reading and watching all the materials. Fun fact, the defence claimed a better personality of hers put that card in the shoe to try to get her some help by being caught. I find this sort of shit about as convincing as combat photos where the cameraman set up fully in front of the charging troops. Listen, water walkers, I just want to know one thing. When we the people jailed that pile of suppurating blubber, the body, did the bad alters get convicted too? Yes? Good result, thank you. And Tracey Wigginton got life in prison, which came far closer to truth in sentencing than it does for most people, 21 years. But the other girls pleaded not guilty and made a fight of it. They unleashed the "Tracey dominated us, we were terrified of her" defense. Hang on, don't cult leaders and dictators normally surround themselves with really yummy chicks? How could you be totally bowled over by the credibility of a cult leader who could only manage to play on the free tier and get dog rap like this? Although it is a fact that Kimmy and Lisa had talked to normal people about the disappearing trick before the murder. All 4 girls claimed it was only meant to be a prank, convince a man he was getting a root fest, then sneak away. Given that they had to carry knives to this act, this is insulting to the intelligence. It's time for the verdicts. Lisa Ptashinsky, guilty of murder, life in prison, of which she eventually served 12. Kim Jervis, guilty of manslaughter, 18 years, of which she eventually served 7. Tracey Waugh, not guilty, free as a bird. Little Tracey left the courtroom and did a rare sensible thing. She disappeared from history. You'd have to be made of stone not to feel very sorry for this woman here. Imagine being that comprehensively betrayed by flesh of your flesh. She has attained embarrassment enlightenment. And here is Bulldog's shattered family leaving the court. The other girls off to the big house. A very good friend of mine was an inmate with Lisa and told me that Lisa was quite reclusive, but would talk with her, but not with anyone young. She was only comfortable with the company of older women. The older, the better. The press were now free to cut loose worldwide. Not very long after the convictions, there was a gay liberation event held in Orley Park. I confronted one of the organisers from Glock Gays and Lesbians on Campus and said, do you think that's going to get you any credibility with the public? And even he admitted that it was kind of... It seemed like a good idea at the time. You see, sodomy was still illegal in 1991, although lesbianism never has been in Queensland. In 2012, Tracey Wigginton finally had told enough cold-blooded lies about her victim's family forgiving her, they hadn't, she was talking through her arse crack, to get parole at last. When the sickening fraud was called out, it was too late. The parole board going back on a decision is as rare as women still demanding equal rights in Ukraine. Last seen living on the Gold Coast, where she's not so much afraid of the media as of Greenpeace pushing her into the water.
Tracey Wigginton is on parole. She's technically a prisoner, so we're not allowed to speak to her. We can't ask her questions.
Calling herself Oberon Fairchild, she demonstrated the folly of treating her as rehabilitated by posting images like this, "Now panic because I'm back," as well as showing off that she had learned to count to at least 1 now. Let others squabble over whether she is rightly to be called a vampire, for no one can ever take away from Tracey Wigginton that she is an authentic dickhead.